are outside the pod, a Miami Dolphins podcast. Here are your outsiders, Danny D and Jules, the ref killer.
So welcome to episode 2. I'm here. I'm Danny. Here with my brother Jules once again. We're about to talk about, the topic of the century for the Miami Dolphins. Jules, how do you feel?
I'm feeling all right. Still getting over this baseball game I went to last night.
Oh.
It was a bit of a downer, but anyways, we're not here to talk about baseball.
Yeah, I feel you because, we're kind of rivals in that sense in baseball, and my team's not doing very well either. So the only reason they're still kind of up there is because they did well to start, but lately, man, they just don't look good. But anyway, I just want to apologize to the viewers, looking at, the last episode and, in the beginning of it. I got to tell you, man, I was struggling. I think I ate some bad sushi or something. And, I was crapping my pants basically right before the episode was recording. And I'll tell you, that first 10 minutes of us recording that episode, for those of you that were watching the video, man, I was sweating. I was not in a good place. It got better after a while. Nerves was probably a little part of it, but at the same time, I was sweating. You'll see some droplets of sweat on my guts were just bubbling, and I didn't know if I was gonna make it. I was pretty close to telling Jules, like, "Hey, man, we gotta pause real quick. I'll be back." But was able to make it through, and we completed it. But there was that little bit of doubt and everything inside my brain where it kind of made me a little bit more nervous, and I wasn't really in the game like I will be today. So we'll start talking Dolphins. After 1999, when Dan Marino left, and we were at the lowest of lows, not only with the team, but, just our emotions, seeing the Dan the man leave forever, it kind of went downhill, and we just haven't. I mean, we've seen the playoffs, but we haven't done anything spectacular since. Do you think that instead of the Colts moving from the AFC East, that it should have been the Miami Dolphins?
I mean, I've gone back and forth on this topic because, at first, my first feeling is like, if you're going to be a good team, you're going to have to beat the best teams in their backyards, whoever it is, because in the playoffs, you're going to be going to the Baltimores, to the Pittsburghs, to Buffalo, to whatever. So it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're in the division, so that's my first thought, right? You're going to have to go to these places, beat the best teams, beat them in their home courts, beat them in their home fields, and withstand the nature and the crowds and everything. And so you always want to beat the best. To be the best, you got to beat the best in their home fields or whatever. But at the same time, I think that most teams are taking advantage of their smaller regional kind of rivals. And we are in a very particular situation where we have to go to these cold cities and withstand those kinds of things. So I go back and forth on this a lot. I'm not a huge purist where I look at rivalries and say, we have to keep these rivalries alive or whatever. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think the game can use some changes and evolve. But yeah, I mean, I don't want it makes someone look like a wuss, to kind of say, oh, we can't go play in these cold cities or whatever, please. I mean, why nobody's gonna care about you, dude, but your own fandom. So I think right now we just gotta, we're just gonna have to stick with it. We're just gonna have to man up, just man up and fins up and do what you gotta do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think there is a little bit of a disadvantage. Buffalo, the Jets, they're up there, pretty close to each other. They don't have to travel down, even though a lot of people will tell you the Miami Dolphins are not the most traveling team. Matter of fact, I think when looking at this year's 2025 schedule, they're not traveling a lot per mile, right? They're not the most traveled team per se. even though they are going to Spain this year. But we'll talk about that later as well. But I mean, yeah, wouldn't it be nice to be, maybe against the Jaguars, maybe again, kind of in the same, you know, division as the Texans, where the weather's kind of the same. And trust me, I am not one of those guys that's trying to get, an advantage basically, or kind of backing out from, like you said, we got to beat these teams no matter what. To be the best, you got to beat the best. And I've always been that guy. I don't want to play the Bills when Josh Allen is hurt. I don't care to beat them at that point. I want the Dolphins to beat the Bills when they're at full speed and they've played the best game they've ever played, and we still beat them at home in Buffalo. That's what I want. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess this gets brought up a lot, maybe. But I guess we could kind of just bury it and just continue. Maybe someday in the future, the Miami Dolphins will probably get moved and into a different division, or maybe the team leaves Miami if the ownership doesn't straighten up. But I think that's a good segue, right? What about the ownership? Do you think we make the playoffs and win a playoff game? Maybe go to the Super Bowl again if we had better ownership.
Oh my gosh, dude. Yeah, I think that part of it has to do, you got to agree that part of the problems have been in the decision making in the front office, for sure. I mean, just after Jimmy Johnson, I think there was agreement up and down. Jimmy Johnson, I guess, wanted to leave at that point, if I remember correctly, right? And so it wasn't a decision there. And then, you bring in Wanstead at that point. I think it was Wanstead at that point, right after Jimmy Johnson. And after that, though, it's been a series of just bad decisions as far as I can remember. I think just a series of just bad decisions in the coaches that we're bringing in. And I think you got to agree that there is a lot, probably more than half of the blame has to go with the decision making of the front office, for sure.
I couldn't disagree, just for the fact that we're still in the same limbo, back and forth, trading coaches, just not being able to punch it again. And we went through a lot of coaches, and we'll get to that next. But as far as the front office ownership, I mean, Greer has been there for quite a bit. I feel like making a lot of mistakes and we're not moving forward from him, but we do change a lot of the coaching staff. And at the same time, though, Ross has put in a bunch of money into the stadium, into the facilities, and again, we're outsiders. We're not in Miami, but and maybe some of you listeners out there from Miami that see the facilities all the time, you could probably say, hey, these facilities are top notch, and that's what we hear. As an outsider, just reading and seeing through basically a third party, I feel like the facilities look fine, right? Like they have everything they need. But
the players agree too, right?
Right.
I mean, the players for the last couple of years have voted Miami as the best place to play and the friendliest of facilities for players and things like that.
That's true. I mean, and maybe that kind of gives me another thought. Is it is how is the I guess the fans, are they selling out the stadium? I didn't actually do my homework on this, but as outsiders, not Miami natives, if I was there, I felt like I'd be almost every, like, at least half season tickets. I'd probably be there for most home games. Are they selling out this stadium?
Well, I'm guilty of not doing my homework either. So, but just by observation, you could definitely see a lot of empty seats in Miami, definitely. And I don't think they've been selling out at all. And true that. If I was in Miami, I would probably be there every week. But I don't know. I haven't seen the last numbers as far as attendance is concerned. But there is definitely, I would say, a little bit of a shift. I think we're losing a lot of the young fans as well. I think what you have at the stadium right now is diehards and the older people, the people that remember the '80s, the people that remember the '90s with Marino
Right,
and all
our
that.
generation, yeah.
Yeah, our generation, for sure. Try to find a young Miami Dolphins fan. That's it's hard. You do see kids, of course, there, and these, the people, the parents that are taking, our generation that are taking the kids there to the stadium, and they're kind of forced to go to these games. But I'm not sure that they're going to carry on, this fandom to the next generation.
I obviously don't want to wrap my head around, the environment of the stadium and the fans and the noise and everything and say that's the reason why the Miami Dolphins are not able to progress from just making the playoffs, but pushing even further into, second round, divisional round, instead of just going in and getting killed the first game like we've been doing and just blaming it on the fan base. I don't think that, don't kill us, Miami Dolphins natives, but it gets your wheels turning a little bit, right? I mean, what is the problem here? And because I don't know, I just can't wrap my head around it. But the next thing we definitely need to talk about is some of the coaching staff, specifically with the head coaching decisions that the front office has actually made. We had Jimmy Johnson, we have Dave Wanstead, but let's talk about some of these other ones that were very terrible. What do you got?
Oh man, just looking down the list here. I mean, I very early on, of course, we had Jim Bates, which I to be honest with you, I have no recollection of what I think that this was a partial. Right, he wasn't even here full season. And then Nick Saban was here. Remember that?
That's right.
I have to, I have to really get my brain going to remember the Nick Saban years. The most I remember from the Nick Saban years are his press conferences. Isn't that sad? The press conferences are the things that I remember most about Nick Saban. The stoic.
Right.
I can't even mimic the guy. But and then Cam Cameron, I think, was that, and then Tony Sperano, which he was here a few years, and that's one that I have a little bit more recollection. Of course, you and I, we went to a game back down in San Diego one time,
right,
where Sperano was coaching, and it was one of the funniest things I experienced because you were yelling at Sperano. Of course, you with your big voice, I swear to God, that dude could hear you. He could hear you, dude, and I think you were getting into his head. I wish we had this stuff on video because this is way back. This is way back when phones still didn't take any video or anything like that. But man, that was a good experience. Of course, we lost that stupid game.
Of course.
But Sperano, I mean, he was one of these very stubborn. You got to do it this certain way. And it almost seems like every play he would run it twice just for the heck of it. Oh, it didn't work. Let's try it again. Like if he was at practice, let's run it to the right. Wait a minute. It was supposed to work. Let's run it again. And then the next play, let's run that one again. It's like, man. And he just, I don't know. And it was the same kind of decision making with plays and with players and personnel. That is just a stubborn guy. And then one day, which I got to give him a lot of credit for, just one day breaks out, you name it, the Wildcat. Well, what? That came out of nowhere. Like, here's this guy that doesn't change, no adjustments at all in game and week to week. He's running the same plays every week. And then suddenly he breaks out the Wildcat. That was like one of the most memorable, weird, and, fun things at the same time. I remember Ronnie Brown just, ecstatic about running these plays. He was so good at it.
Yeah.
And other teams are trying to emulate it, but no, I mean, Ronnie Brown was the master Wildcat, general. And that was so good, man. And then who threw the touchdown? Was it Ronnie Brown threw the touchdown pass to Chad Pennington out of the Wildcat too? I mean, Chad Pennington, no arm Chad Pennington. It was so ironic that somebody else threw a pass to him. Anyway, I think Chad Pennington was one of the better, but
yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah. Sorry, man. It's all related, right? We're talking about Sperano.
Of course, you got to be able to talk about it, but yeah, we'll get to the quarterbacks. They'll get their turn.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Tony Sperano. So I'm wondering what you think about these first few coaches. That we got after.
For sure. Some of these guys I don't even remember really, and of course, a little bit of my background. I'm in the military, or I was, and so a lot of these early 2000s, I was in the dirt, man. I didn't have time to watch a lot of football, but I did what I could. I didn't have cable. I didn't have anything like that, so. But I did see, like, Nick Saban. That's why I completely forgot about it, because those years specifically, I wasn't around to watch too much football. But for Sperano, for sure, I remember, we went to the game. I'm going back to this game again real quick, just because, I remember, I was yelling at Sperano. We were not too close, but we were pretty close. We had pretty good tickets there in San Diego at Qualcomm. And you know what? I just remember also, praying that they suck for luck at that time, right? We just needed a quarterback. We always wanted a quarterback since 1999, so I wanted them to suck for luck. And Sperano was kind of doing a good job of it, but yeah, we didn't quite get there. They won a few games with that damn Wildcat, and yeah, Ronnie Brown. For sure. Obviously, you throw in Ricky Williams as well, and it's definitely a mad scientist, Wildcat, freaking couple of very good running backs, and they kind of bursted into the scene. But yeah, for sure. But let's get into the next couple. What do you think?
Well, you know what? I'll skip Todd Bowles for a sec, because he was only here for like a few games, a handful of games. We got to go to.
Yeah, and he was interim as well, right?
He was interim, but we got to go to Joe Philbin, right? Yeah. That little fricker Philbin, right? To me, that was some of the most embarrassing coaching that I've seen. And we'll get to the most, but he's probably the next most embarrassing coach that I think we've had in the Miami Dolphins. And we got to see it firsthand. That's even like we put it on camera too. Like, what are we doing? We put it on Hard Knocks. The guy,
we had to try to get some fans, man. We had to try to get some people at the seat.
Yeah, right. Let's do it while we're probably, being led by the most embarrassing coaching job we've seen in the Miami Dolphins. I mean, that was so terrible. In some ways, I felt so bad for the guy, that everyone got to see that firsthand. And I'm sure he's an awesome guy. I'm sure he's a good dude and everything, but man, that was a terrible coaching job right there. And seeing that, I mean, it to me, the games and everything, the coaching it's a lot of it is a blur, but on purpose, because I just went into my brain and just kind of deleted that part of that hard drive, because that was just such a bad time for us. I was so excited to see Hard Knocks, and then was just so disappointed for the results. So I wonder what you think about that.
Every time he's on camera, he just looked lost. And I felt like he wasn't commanding anything in that team. And I just remember watching it. I'm just like, this is not a head coach, man. I'm sure he knew a lot about football. And I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure he was a great guy, but he wasn't a head coach, man. Like a lot of the guys that's on our, on our list since Don Shula and Jimmy Johnson and Dave Wanstead, who were probably the the only two that were anywhere near the type of, the type of head coaches that we needed. But yeah, Joe Philbin, I just couldn't I couldn't see, I did not see head coach in his face, in his mannerisms, and in anything he did. And yeah, of course, Hard Knocks was just an embarrassment. I couldn't, like I said in our previous episode, we talked about, jumping ship. And if we weren't so, enamored by Dan Marino, and if the Arizona Cardinals came into the fold maybe a little later, around that same time as Joe Philbin, we probably would have been, Cardinal fans right now. But yeah. And then, after that, we get Gaze. And, he had those crazy eyes. Everybody was making fun of him, putting tacos in the air, and he would look at them. I don't want to. Again, probably a great dude. He had he was involved in some great offenses in Denver and stuff like that. But of course, they had Peyton Manning.
He made the playoff once. Yeah.
Right, but I mean, you and that's what I would have said if I was in the front office, right? I can't give him all that credit because it was Peyton Manning. So I don't know, man. I want to know what you think about Gaze, but he was another coach that just he was maybe an offensive coordinator, but a head coach was not. So what do you think?
No, man, just like Philbin, I think that Adam Gaze was very, very similar bad coaching style, just like Joe Philbin. I think it was a bit worse because at least Joe kind of pretended to be a coach. Gaze just had no idea and was clueless most of the time. In front of a camera, he looked lost, deer in headlights. I'm pretty sure there are memes out there about him just totally gazing off into the distance, and I mean it was gut-wrenchingly bad and embarrassing, and the Jets gave him a chance to. I mean that tells you a lot right there, But man, I don't know. Again, just like Philbin, that's all as far as the games are concerned and how he managed the games and everything. That's just a bit of a blur to me, and on purpose, because that's not something I want to really remember about the Dolphins. I'll just stick to positives in order to remain a sane fan and be able to do this right now. So, yeah, right. What do you think about Adam?
Think about it though. We're still here. We're still big fans, huge fans. We don't miss a beat when it comes to Miami Dolphins. I promise you. And obviously, we care enough to say, you know what, I'm gonna get all this crap put together in my office here and start talking about it in the podcast. So, we have love for this team. And to get a little bit more current, right, with this next couple of coaches, starting with Flores. The scandal, I think, kind of obviously derailed his ability to probably focus at being a head coach. And really, I do not hate Flores, even if the rumors are true about him and Tua, but he's kind of more my speed, right? Because having a background in the military, we kind of have that same mentality. Is like, hey, you're not gonna do what I want you to do. You're gonna go run some sprints and go touch that sign over there and all that stuff. I'm familiar with those things. So I did not hate Flo, and honestly, he brought us back from some, from what you thought was gonna be a terrible year. He would bring in some good runs, and but for sure, it seemed like he could get the defense specifically motivated to do well, and it seemed to be able to make adjustments on the fly. Okay, but of course there was the scandal and maybe not seeing eye to eye with maybe the rest of his coaching staff / some of his offensive players were probably not getting what they wanted out of their head coach. But yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what derailed him. I'm not sure if there was more. Obviously, we're outsiders, not so much insiders. We're not seeing inside the building what exactly went on, and obviously nobody else gave him a shot. So I'm thinking that everybody was in the same boat, right? Where it's like, okay, he probably wasn't as good as we thought he was. But what do you think about Flo?
We went from one extreme to the other, right? In some ways, we had these other coaches that really couldn't command the team, that players weren't really, understanding them, or what I'm trying to say, like they weren't believing in these guys. They weren't believing in these other guys. Brian Flores, they gravitated toward him. They kind of got him, in a sense. Yeah. They believed in his style. They believed in what he was saying, what he was preaching. It was a total opposite of what Philbin and Gaze brought. It was refreshing in some ways. He got us a 10-win season. That was exciting. By the way, How do you not get to the playoffs with 10 wins? But, I think he commanded the room. He gained the respect of the players. They really followed his lead in a lot of ways. Now, he maybe didn't have the right people skills or whatever, or he was, I guess he wasn't like a player's coach, or he didn't, I don't know, he was maybe too hard on them. I mean, is there even a thing as far as football coach is concerned? But I thought he did a good job, and I agree that it was time for him to go because of what had happened. You can't, even though I think I agree with his coaching style and what he was doing with the team, but how do you come back from that? Right. is a problem. You can't have that distraction in a locker room. So I agree with what happened. I agree that he's a great coach, maybe not a great head coach. I think he's an adequate coach, and maybe that's why he hasn't gotten maybe head coach, kind of consideration lately. But I think he did for the Miami Dolphins some really good things that I thought, we kind of hung on to during that time.
I kind of just want to throw in there real quick. I mean, there was players, kind of like Van Ginkel, who's one of my favorite players coming out of that era, when we were kind of down, right? And we picked up Van Ginkel, and he was just a motor, man. I was sad to see him go for sure, but he was one of those guys that loved Brian Flores, and that's why he ended up with the Vikings, the Viking freaking freak of a Viking that he is himself. But yeah, man, every time I see Van Ginkel out there freaking blowing plays up with the Vikings, I definitely get freaking mad about it, because that was one of those players that I wish I would have kept, especially with our linebacker core nowadays, going into a little bit more current stuff. But anyway, in between that real quick, before we get to the next was, his name is escaping me, but current Detroit Lions.
Dan Campbell?
Yeah, Dan Campbell, man. I think he did enough that year when he was interim. I swear, at the end of that year, I was like, just give the man a shot, give him one more year, man. But they didn't, unfortunately. And again, he's one of those guys that I think is a big motivator, loves his players and loves the sport. And I think he's one of those guys that kind of leads by example, right? He comes in, he's still jacked. He's still, what I mean? I think the guys like to see that. Just like in the military, they don't want to see no weak ass leading the front. Yeah. They want to see one of them, another animal leading them. And I think he had that, right? And he has that. And that's why Detroit is doing pretty well with him. And they got lucky. And I wish we would have tied him up and maybe gave him a shot. Maybe we'd be in a different conversation right now. But yeah, what you think about that? And then move on to our current coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I think we missed out on something special there, and totally agree. And by the way, the front office was kind of, in the line of coaches that we've been getting before then, they were kind of getting, assistants and people that other coaches were kind of like, bringing up or whatever and mentoring. And so in that same line of thinking, I'm not sure why Dan Campbell didn't get a shot when you have a history of doing that. And then here comes Dan Campbell. You put him at interim, and then you don't give him a shot. I mean, that was kind of weird. I guess they did the same with Bates and Bowles and stuff. When they put him in as interims, they don't give him a shot. So I guess maybe I was wrong in my first part of the comment. But I thought that Dan Campbell would have been the obvious choice, especially since the players were relating to him so strongly. And that was the word I was trying to find before with Brian Flores.
Right.
They related to the guy.
Right. Let me squeeze in real quick. Let me interrupt you because I forget things. And I want to say, like, the options weren't great. Also, you know what I mean? The other options weren't great. So why not just keep them?
Right. Was that when they went with Joe Philbin? Right.
Yeah.
They went with Joe. Isn't that when they? I mean, come on, dude. Really? It was just kind of a head scratcher.
It was gay,
for me.
but either one, it doesn't. Oh my!
It's the same guy, right? I mean, I guess one was younger than the other. Let's try the young version of Philbin. I don't know. It was just, oh my god, yeah. It was kind of a head scratcher. Yeah, the guy doesn't he look like he could play still, right? Dan Campbell, he could. Yeah. He looks like he could play. He's fired up. He's probably more fired up than the players. It looks like coming out of the tunnel. And I think the players just connect, man. They just relate so hard, and they love the guy. I can see it, man. I wish you just wish that for the Dolphins, because I think the fans, I think we yearn for that. I'm getting choked up a little bit. We yearn for that. We've not had this stuff since like these 90s, right? Where we see such a special connection between coaches and players with players. It's just, man, I think that Dan Campbell brings that to Detroit, and it's just so sad that we maybe missed out on something special here.
Yeah, and maybe, obviously, like, again, we don't see what's behind the closed door, but maybe Dan Campbell didn't want to be there and he wanted to be in Detroit, or he had some kind of, maybe there's a little bit that he knew that maybe he'd end up in Detroit as being a prior player of the Detroit Lions. And maybe that's what it was, right? Maybe he didn't want to be there.
I think he went to New Orleans. Yeah, I think he went to New Orleans in the mid.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying. I'm just trying to extend the olive branch to the front office, right? And say maybe they didn't give him a chance because he didn't want it. So I don't know. Again, we're outsiders, not insiders. And but yeah, moving on to our current situation with Mike McDaniel. And let me just throw my 2 cents in first. I think with McD, obviously he came in freaking guns blazing, right? I mean, I feel like the players took very well to him. Obviously, Tua had like his best year when McDaniel came to us, and seemingly all the players loved him. But I have to relate in one sense here, right? Where, again, and I don't want to bring in my military background too much, but I like to relate it to this, is where you have leadership where it's, they're friendly. They want to be your friend. They want to be your brother and everything. They're always there. They let you do whatever you want, basically. And it's good at first. The players will really take up on the beginning. They're like, yeah, happy. Everybody's getting their money. They could do whatever they want. They could run whatever route they want. They could do flips. Nothing against Tyreek, by the way. I'm just saying that the players kind of run wild and do whatever they want. They get happy. They get motivated for that first little bit. And then that discipline starts to happen, or undisciplined at this point. And again, I'm very versed in this subject. That when you're friendly like that, when you're their friend, eventually their discipline is gonna start to go down. And they get a little froggy with you. They start to do things that you don't want them to do. They start not listening to you. They start not respecting you. They lose respect. And then you won't be able to get that back. And hopefully I'm wrong, but I think McDaniel might have passed that. I think McDaniel has lost the respect that he had when he first got there and was able to, like I said, motivate them and get the best out of them. But now their discipline is gone. And like I said, you won't get that back. And I hope I'm wrong, or else we're just going downhill. What do you think?
Oh man, that was gold right there, man. That's pure gold what you said, and I agree totally, 100%, 100%. That style would only get you so far, and it'll run stale for sure. It'll run stale really quick, and I think that kind of style, that kind of he's he's our friend, he's our it doesn't work, but for maybe a couple of years, and we're seeing it. You get 2 winning seasons, and then you can see a regression, right at the third year, and all these little problems start stirring up in the locker room, right? We saw it towards the end of the season last year, and then now in the off season, and I'm not as hopeful, and we'll talk about this upcoming season a lot, but I think something's brewing that we're not gonna like. But yeah, as far as McDaniel's concerned, I think he's an awesome guy. I like his sense of humor and things like that. I think it's cool, it's refreshing. But as a head coach, I don't like that. I think as a coordinator, he would be awesome and great. But he's still a guy who's gonna be the friend, the guy who's like, shooting the shit with the players. But then here comes the coach, the head coach. You can't be doing this, There is that other guy missing. There is that other piece missing that we don't have with McDaniel. And I think a combination of McDaniel and somebody else could be gold. We're missing out on something like that. And how do you fix that? I don't know. How do you unless you fire him today, how do we get that? I hope I'm wrong too. I hope he regains that respect from players, regains that locker room. But just as you said, honestly and very pessimistically, I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Imagine Dan Campbell as head coach and McDaniel as his offensive coordinator.
Shut the frick up.
It would be great. I mean, you're right. I think a combination with McDaniel would be freaking awesome. But yeah, at this point, obviously you can't keep him. He wouldn't want to stay if you say, hey, you're going to be the offensive coordinator. We're bringing in a new head coach. He's not going to want to stay with the team. He'd probably want to get a different job. But yeah, I mean,
I hope I'm wrong, man. It could be a combination of McDaniel and maybe a player. Like, let's say it was McDaniel and Marino. Marino commands respect. He's a leader. You
think he'd want to be a head coach?
No. What I'm saying, What I'm saying is maybe a player.
Oh, if you add like a
leader,
quarterback,
a leader on the that's more vocal. That's more vocal. That's more in your face, like Marino was. That combination maybe it worked a little bit better than how we have right now. I just don't see enough of that, especially in the offense, where someone's gonna grab somebody from the face mask and say, "You better get your shit together right now." Yeah. Or we're gonna lose this fucking game. Sorry about the F word, but that's maybe there's some leadership missing here. There is some guy that's cracking that whip. There's something missing in there. We can't just have it all pink sunglasses and roses. It just can't happen all the time.
And short pants and nice kicks.
Right? And some cool sunglasses and some weird sense of humor. That's only going to get you so far. We need somebody to be cracking the whip. It could be another coach. It could be a player. We're missing that. Maybe some of these young players that we drafted, maybe, I don't know. We'll talk about that. Maybe some of the players we brought in. Is there someone in there? Or maybe an old guy like Tua. Is Tua going to?
Yeah, and
he just looks like such a, we'll get into that. But, I don't see it. Call me pessimistic or whatever. I just don't see it. I think we're headed some more pain here. More pain.
Hey, pain is gain, I guess. Not so much for the Dolphins, I guess.
We got to hit rock bottom first, and then we'll,
Yeah, I think we've done that a few times, though. You know what I mean? I mean, come on, man. Throw us a bone here. At least a playoff win, But, yeah, absolutely. And you know what? The conversation was really good today, and that's why we went a little bit longer than I think we both wanted to go. But I think it was really good conversation, man. And
loved it.
We wanted this second episode to kind of cover the space between 1999 and then current, right? What happened? This was the catch-up episode from where we were in love with the Dolphins, right, to where we're still in love with the Dolphins too, but since then, 99, when Dan Marino left, and to now, what's happened, right? And how did we get where we are? And that was to summarize, bad front office decisions leading to bad coaches, terrible quarterbacks, which, you know what? We didn't really talk about. I think we need to go back to that, or should we get another episode? Or you want to just keep going and talk about quarterbacks?
We can go next time if you want. I think we have enough for this episode, but we definitely need to talk about quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And
you know what?
Maybe our terrible drafting too, because that's another piece of this.
Yeah, there's a couple of those. That's right. That's a good one. You know what? That's what we're going to do. So next episode, we'll talk the quarterbacks since 1999, Dan Marino leaving and retiring till now. And then also some of the good / bad decisions that the front office made between those years as well. So we'll do another episode of bad decisions before we get too close to preseason and some of the more interesting current events of Miami Dolphins. Although there is some current events that we'll probably throw in next episode to kind of talk about. But for right now, we kind of just want to catch you up from the origins of Outside the Pod with me and Jules, and between then and the current season. So for me and Jules, I hope you guys have a great day, rest of your day. Hit the like button, subscribe to us. We're here to bring up a bunch of good content, some comedic relief, and some just raw Dolphins talk. So hope to see you guys next time. I really do.
Same here, everybody. Fins up.
All right.